Well, thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
So, yeah, I want to start just by introducing you to anyone who hasn't read your work or isn't familiar with your books. Um, as everyone should know, Steve Majors, who is not the $6 million man, which is what I also grew up with, but I like that you have a sense of humor about that. Steve Majors' work explores the intersections of race, identity, and family. His debut memoir, which came out in 2021, is called High Yella, a modern family memoir, and it recounts his experience growing up as a white passing mixed race child in an all black family in rural Western New York. And his latest essay collection, which we're going to focus on, is titled Man Made: In Search of Dads, Daddies, Father Figures, and Fatherhood. And believe me, it is all in there. Plus, he's also at work on his first full length play, American Gothic. So you are a very busy guy. And so thanks for taking some time to talk to us.
Well, thanks, Jerry. Again, I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
So I want to jump in just right away because as I mentioned to you, I have so many questions because you cover almost every facet of manhood, queerness, gayness, fatherhood. I mean, everything is in this book. And so I guess first, explain to us, as you mentioned to me beforehand, this is a memoir and essays, but really you see it as a collection of essays, whereas your first book was a fully formed memoir, meaning you had a narrative arc from beginning to end, right?
Yeah, and again, I mean, if you ever write a second book, you're like, well, I'm not going to write the same thing again. But I found like the first book, which is this one, Hayella, I found that there was almost an element that I left off the page, an element of my identity that I felt like I had somehow, if not suppressed, I certainly didn't give it as much attention. And that was, what does it mean to be a gay man, a gay father? And so there were elements of that that I felt like I needed to bring out in a different form. And Man Made was that attempt to do so. It was really a collection of essays about different facets. Like, even as a gay man, I think we can slice our identities up in different respects. So, who I was as a little kid trying to figure out my identity is different than who I was at 20, then it's different than who I am today. And even between those, I think there are other slices that you can take at sort of exploring yourself. What does it mean to be a gay man who is looking for a father figure versus what does it mean to be a gay man who is a father themselves? And so
Yeah.
it was really kind of exciting to kind of explore those different aspects.
Yeah, I mean, so you do have it sectioned into basically chronological, but we go slip into future and past here and there. And you start out with your childhood, which you never knew your biological father, and you had an abusive father growing up and then you had other sort of surrogate father figures, some white, some black. And then you say very point blank, like, um, I thought of masculinity, or I think of masculinity very different from my brothers or of my other men in my life. And right now, we get so much talking about the men are not all right or what's going on with boys. I just finished Peggy Orenstein's Boys and Sex, and so I mean that's only a couple years old, and I'm thinking, oh, I would hate to be a parent right now, and you are one. But we, as when we were boys, we know that it was complicated enough, and you really dig into those scary moments, the sexy moments, the confusing moments. I guess first I want to start out. Was it harder to write about those childhood memories and traumas, or was it harder to write about right now being a dad in 21st century America?
I'd say it was equally as hard. And here's why. If you'll notice, if anyone picks up the book, they'll notice that they're all written in present tense. And so that was a conscious choice. I wanted to bring people into the moment. Like, here's how I was thinking about identity or masculinity or what it meant to be a boy or a man or someone who was gay in those very specific moments in time. And I'll tell you, Jerry, as I sort of wrote those essays, and even as I sit with them today, it takes me back to those moments. And so, equally as scared of what it meant for me to be a young boy trying to figure out, like, am I gay? What does it mean about me? What do others think about me? Uh, it's equally as scary to think about, like, how do I show up as a dad to two young women um, who are taking from the environment their idea of what a dad should be, a very masculine, very kind of heteronormative sort of like dads are like this. Even though like I literally raised these kids from birth, they have a very specific idea of what they assume a father should be. So it's even scary to think about that now. Like, who am I today?
I remember though, as a kid, being very confused by all the pop culture dad stuff too, because my dad was working class, he was a plumber, and all the things when you got into that Father's Day thing was all about ties and golf. And my dad he never wore a tie, he didn't golf. And then you kind of address that as well. Like, one, how your children what you're called, how they're going to engage with you, when they also realize they don't have a mother, and what that means. But also, when you're a child, you're like my dads, let's say, don't really fit the model that everybody's telling me a dad is supposed to be, even if it's from the Brady Bunch or whatever you're perceiving, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it as a kid, and I think everyone has like those. We all get these signs and symbols and these archetypes that are sort of presented to us of what it is to be a man, right? And so I come from a particular generation, and a lot of that came from television and pop culture
Yeah.
and magazines. And, this was the mirror that I'm holding up to myself. I'm like, is this who I'm supposed to be? And I find now those things still endure no matter how
Yeah.
much progress that we've made. I think still as men, we are presented with all of these images and ideas of what it means to be a man. So no wonder, right? We have a generation of young men who are searching, like, what does it mean? How do we answer these questions for ourselves? And many, I would posit, many young men are lost, trying to kind of sort through that.
So I'm the oldest son of 4. I have 2 sisters and a brother. My brother's 10 years younger. You were 4 boys, and I've heard about these families with all boys. It's almost like it can become feral, and you actually have a scene where, like, you talk about the stench of the room and what your brothers convince you, instead of, uh, peeing in your bed, that you should pee in the corner, and your mom is like, "This place," like, you really go there, right? And you really reveal these things. Tell me a little bit about, I mean, and you've published some of these as excerpts about your brothers. How hard was that to reveal some of these really ugly truths, and some of the impact that they had on you, but at the same time having to address, one of your brothers is a predator. I think 2 of your brothers have died at a younger age. So tell me what that was like, because it's a hard thing, and everyone always wants to know. How do you write about your siblings?
Yeah. Well, I certainly couldn't have written this book 10, 15, 20 years ago. I think part of it is the nature of the age that I'm at. Quite honestly, the 2 of my brothers have passed. It is easier now for me to share some of the darker stories that I might not have felt comfortable while they were alive. But ultimately, I think that readers, when they pick up a book, they want to make sure, is the narrator, especially folks who are writing nonfiction or memoir or essays, can I trust the narrator? Are they authentic? Are they truthful? Are they believable and honest? And so I think readers can pick up on where you are not, where
Right.
you are shading the truth. And so I've always felt compelled to be completely honest with any readers about my experiences, my family. And, one of the things that I hope comes through is it's especially I think in my first book, I try to be as hard on myself as I am on anyone else that I write about. So warts and all, I'm willing to talk about things that I might not be so proud about, things that I'm ashamed about, things that I wish I had done differently, things about myself that I wish, were different. And in that way, I feel um, especially for my siblings or my family members, I can say, "Look, I'm taking as good as I'm getting as good as I'm giving." Right? Yes, I'm the one who's deciding. Ultimately, I'm filtering what I say about myself, but I try to be as hard on myself as I am on others.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you definitely don't, spare yourself at all. But how was that? I mean, so, I write personal memoir, we publish a lot of personal memoirs. Um But often when I'm workshopping things, especially if it's in a mixed group of non-gay or non-queer people, I'll get a lot of negative criticism or not wanting me to be so, blunt about sex or about some of these things, and you go there. Did you receive any of that kind of feedback from some of your readers? Like, they're like, "Are you sure you wanna tell us this? Are you sure you wanna go there?"
No, not for my readers, but I will say it was a honest conversation that I had with my husband, right? And, he is, one of my first readers of everything, and he's always like, "Wow, it's all out there." And I'm like, "Yep, it's all out
Yeah.
there." And we have an honest conversation with it anytime I publish anything. I never want him to be surprised. But ultimately, I come back to, folks who are straight, they write about their sex lives. They write about their sexcapades. They write about their loves
Mistakes?
and their mistakes and their losses in ways that nobody else judges. And so I had to like hold myself to that same standard. If I were straight in writing about these things, would would I still be would I still even doubt myself, or would I still feel compelled to self-censor? And so, allowing me to step outside of myself and my identity and to hold myself to that standard made it that much easier. I'm like, "Well, other people have written, honestly, much more
Mhm.
explicitly than I ever have about themselves, and the only difference is our identity." And so, in that way, that gave me permission to be pretty honest and pretty blunt.
You do say that you wish that you'd been able to have a connection with your brothers sooner, but because of being gay and having to protect yourself, you did feel distance from them, and then you lost some of them, so you never were. I mean, obviously, we all have regrets, but it was a really dangerous and scary time. I mean, do you see that there could have been a way that you could have connected with them and not been abused?
No, not I would say I only speak in my family. No. I mean, I grew up in a family, that, regularly used the F slur and talked about, um, anyone who was gay or smacked of being gay as being less than, deficient, criminal, predatory. And so, as a young boy, as a young man, I don't know if there was any way I could have overcome their perceptions of what it meant to be gay any earlier than I did. Now, to their credit, like when I did come out to them, I never received any backlash from any of them. And I think that is it's the change in the times. I think that their attitudes changed as the times changed. I think that, um, truly, they always knew. They always had a hint. It was just something that perhaps they hoped wasn't true about me. But I think, I lived my life. I've lived my life in a way, that they respected me and loved me and got to a point that, when I told them, they understood that I'm still the same person. They still have the same love and affection for me that they did before they knew. Um, but I just don't think that they would have been ready for it, even if I
Yeah.
was.
Well, you also mentioned, I think so well, because I think people forget that in the 70s, the 80s, even into the 90s, our pop culture role models were often child molesters, serial killers. They were all, America's Most Wanted. It was they're gonna, that was what I remember Andrew Cunanan being like, "Oh, he's gay." Like this was like a huge deal. Um, so when that is the mainstream perception, and so if you were to come out to somebody that you aren't sure what they might think, "Oh, immediately you're a child molester or you're gonna be a drunk or a killer," or, like, how I mean, obviously you write about this so eloquently, how you got over that, and it took a long time, um, but I love that you went there with the idea that pop culture, that was the pop culture.
Oh my gosh, I can't tell you. I grew up in a time where, there were just 3 major networks and, anyone who was gay, what I mean, these were the tropes. They were a child predator. They were ostracized by their families. They were, victims, right? Villains or victims. Those were the only 2 roles that anyone in pop
Yeah.
culture who was gay was allowed to sort of inhabit. And then you watched a slow but meaningful change. And, you know, I remember those moments. I remember those characters on television. Even if it was, I'm going way, way back, talk shows like Oprah and, Donahue, and when they were first brought and magazine articles like in Time and Newsweeklies, when they were first allowed to sort of step out of the shadows and be seen as sort of three-dimensional human beings and people who were not that. And that was just reality TV. And then there were the fictionalized versions of folks. I'm dating myself and I go back to like Soap
Right.
and
Billy Crystal
Billy
character.
Crystal, that character, and guest starring characters on, sitcoms and on dramas that would come on. And slowly but surely, you watch the pop culture sort of change that narrative. And that was in many ways affirming for a young boy like me being able to see that. And I think about this generation with many, many, many more positive role models in pop culture. And yet, there are still those vestiges, still those areas that you can point out and you're like, "Oh, there goes that trope, there goes that stereotype." Um, and some are even meant to be positive, but they are so limiting, right?
Yeah.
There's the gay fashionista. There's there's the gay, there's the stereotype about like sort of the rugged lesbian or the effeminate gay man or, the promiscuous, bi person. And you're like, and it's meant to kind of sort of show more, they're meant to kind of be some of them endearing, but in ways some they're not, because they're limiting to our full humanity and our full spectrum of identity.
So hopefully you don't hate that I'm going to ask this question, but you talk about you had crushes on these hockey players, and we're going through this whole heated rivalry time. Is it weird for you to see that everybody's obsessed with gay hockey players when you were there first? You were like, I had crushes on lots of hockey guys, and got
Yeah.
rebuffed many times.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I forgot about that part of the book. Yeah, it is weird, but I remember what it was like. And I went to a school in upstate New York that was a true sort of hockey school. And I think men at the school outnumbered women something like 6 or 7 to 1. And it is weird. And in that environment, and I write about this, there is a bit of this sort of I'm looking for what the word is. This uh I believe that sexuality is on a spectrum. And I think that there were some of those men like who I know were, if they were not gay, they were absolutely questioning or curious,
Mhm.
right? And it can be confusing for someone who is squarely gay, to get signals and to get signs from seemingly straight men, or who actually may be straight and identify as straight, that there's room for sort of experimentation or curiosity. And it can be very curious, very confusing to kind of, and very hard to parse out, right? Like, okay, um, to straight guys experimenting maybe okay and something they could laugh off, but, like, if it's a straight and a gay man, right, like, that there's something that is flawed or almost troublesome or dangerous about that. And so, yeah, it's a weird time to see straight people, women and men just, like, real like, identify with uh, this heated rivalry sort of narrative. And I've read something recently that like what is appealing to them is about, it's the softening of male identity. That's what's it's not necessarily about the sex, but it's like, wow, men can be emotionally open,
Right.
emotionally vulnerable, in ways that once again pop culture does not always allow them to be seen, straight or gay.
And yet you talk about when, as you call them, soft boys, when you're considered a soft boy, or when I know in Black culture often there is this idea of being too soft, right? And so you're taught to actually armor up or to, to go against that softness. I recently saw a play off Broadway called The Monsters, and you have this actor who becomes an MMA fighter, and he's so hard and monosyllabic, but when he goes back to like when he's a teenager, you see this sweet, silly boy, right? And then there's something that happens with boys where they are told, stop being soft, stop being silly, you need to man up. And you write about that quite a lot.
I mean, I'm so glad you brought that up. Like one of the things in the conversations about the book, they'd be like, what is the things that most surprised you that you discovered about yourself that you sort of, unearthed? And it was that aspect. When I think of myself at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, very soft, very effeminate, like my affectations, my vocal intonations, my, my whole physicality was a lot different. And both figuratively and literally, it was beat out of me, you know, um, from my brothers who wanted to toughen me up, right? From, you know, playground bullies, right? Who just wanted to pummel it out of me. And, I'd say figuratively from pop culture and picking up other cues and clues, uh, and that like it was not okay to be that way. If I wanted to if I wanted to have friends, if I wanted to fit in, if I wanted to be safe, I had to have more masculine mannerisms.
Right.
And it becomes so ingrained in you. You wake up one day and you're like, how did I become this person? Like, whatever happened to that soft, more vulnerable, more emotionally open, um, more emotionally attuned human being?
Hmm.
Where did that little boy go? I don't know. It's so far removed from who I am today, but I feel a sense of loss too for that little boy.
But you're also searching for somebody. So you at one point talk about going on an AOL chat room and meeting a guy that you call Sir. And you said, some people were going there for sex. There was even maybe straight guys who were all being going there to be trained to be a man.
Mm,
Tell us a little bit about Sir and about that experience.
yeah, it's just so fascinating. I think back on this period of my life, and look, I don't know. I know what I was looking for a couple of things. I think number one, I was looking for a father figure.
Hmm.
I Now, not every gay man is looking for a father figure who decides to kind of explore that realm of identity. Um, but yes, others are looking for masculinity, affirmation, right? Affection, acknowledgement from these hyper masculine men, right? Like, oh, you see me, you like me, right? Um, and you'll model for me what it is for me to be a man. And in
Yeah.
order to be a man, I have to be hyper masculine or I have to submit to you, right? Like
Right.
there's another element of it, like it's a little, oh God. I mean, there's something tied up in, uh yeah, I will teach you to be a man. And so do
Yeah.
these manly things or so this was, many, many years ago. And that's what I was looking for. And I didn't realize it. And I have no regrets about it, like a little embarrassment, but it was something that I needed, I guess, at that point in my life. And this was someone who thought that like sort of physical discipline and domination of like sort of my actions was somehow something that he needed to give to me, and he divined that it was something that I wanted. And it's something I kind of had to grow out of. I'm like, I get like I am a man, right? I like no matter how I show up in the world, I am a man. Like that's just my expression. Has nothing to do with my biology,
Hmm.
and it has nothing to do with my identity.
Hmm.
It's a conscious expression of myself. And
Right.
that can look many different ways. You can have very effeminate men and very masculine men. The expression can vary widely, but it doesn't come from something that somebody gives you. It
Right.
is something that you decide it's on your own.
At the same time as you acknowledge you're looking for a father figure, but you're also just looking for what you think love is. And so I'm curious, it comes up many times, like how do you define love? Like, and obviously we're talking about romantic love, but we're also talking about filial love. We're talking about different types of love, but you really grapple with like, are these moments where I'm also looking for this thing? Is it just love that I'm looking for?
Yeah. I think an element of it is, absolutely. And I think you have to sort of parse it out differently. And so, clearly in that stage of my life, I was looking for love, right? But I was looking for many other things, and some things I was substituting for love too, right? And I think what I appreciate about the book when I reflect about it, when I even look at, you mentioned this, it's organized by different stages of life. So everything from boyhood to brotherhood to bachelorhood to adulthood and manhood and fatherhood, and the essays are contained within those sort of thematic headings, and and at each stage, right, I can honestly say I was looking for a different aspect of love, right? Sometimes I was getting it, sometimes I was not. Sometimes I was substituting different things for it, whether it was sex for love or a relationship dynamic for love. And even as a father now, right? Looking for love from my daughters, and what does that look like, and what should the expectations be about how they see me as a father and whether they love me enough. And I just think it's fascinating to be able to reflect on different aspects of your life through different phases of your life and think about, what was it that I was looking for in that moment? What did I get? What did I give? And what am I still looking for?
Right. So I wanted to read a section. It's actually at the end of the chapter or the essay that you titled "Dirty Old Man." It's just the last three paragraphs on my copy. It's on page 74. And this is what you wrote. Like many young men, I first convinced myself I'm looking for a sexual coupling to bridge the gap in my life. It takes years for me to understand what I need is an emotional connection. Like a sixth sense, this man and men like that have the ability to tune into the vulnerabilities of other men and boys. And when they do, they use psychological coercion, physical force, and sometimes a boy's drunken consent to fulfill their twisted desires. We gay boys and men may think we are the hunters looking for our first sexual conquest, but sometimes, all too late, we discover we are the prey.
Mm.
I mean, I definitely have been there. So I bravo to writing that. Tell us a little bit about getting to that point of understanding.
Yeah, and I'm going to just read a sentence from the beginning of the chapter, and I think
Mm,
this kind of bridges it. And it is, when it comes to sex and relationships, men are said to relish the role of hunters. It's a toxic attribute that applies to some of us, whether straight or gay. And so
mhm,
I talk about this idea that, I guess, um, we're socialized to be the hunters in relationships and to go out and to sort of seek these things, to have sexual conquests, to have romantic liaisons, right? To get, to acquire, to have, to hold, to pull close. And yet, when I reflect on my the experience of how I've been treated, like when I was the one being conquered or I was the one being sought, right? I think it's I I think about the times that men have used um everything from alcohol to physical force to coercion to shame to to conquer me, to take those things from me.
mhm,
And I think about the times, quite honestly, when I have done the same. And perhaps not to the extreme that other men have, but I can honestly say there are times, and I am not proud of them, and I would hazard a guess that this is true for many men, straight or gay, many, the majority, where we have taken something from another man, in this case, in the context of this conversation, to get what we wanted, right?
Right.
Their self-esteem, money, their physical safety, their um their freedom of choice. I mean, even small things in order to get, if not even sex, their attention, their love, their proximity to them. And so I think we all have to grapple and think about that in our lives and relationships. Are there things that we have done to other men in the for the sake of love or sex or friendship that we regret?
Right.
Absolutely.
I will go a step further and say there's another mind fuck there for me because, I know that because I didn't wanna seem like the hunter sometimes, I would put myself into a role of making myself very available so that the other person would have to be the pursuer, so that I didn't feel like I was the one who was, in a hierarchical situation where I was the person pursuing, even if that was my MO, right? Like, so it gets so complicated, right?
It does. And can I just add this real briefly? It it has nothing to do with masculinity. It
Right.
has nothing to even do with the spectrum of queer identity. It has nothing to even do with people's like how good a person they are. I think even the best person, right? Like has done this. And I think we just need to reckon with it. Yeah.
So let's talk about the black gayness of it all, because you really grapple with that as well, especially not feeling black enough and even having your daughter at one point, you're wondering like, oh, does she not see me as black because I'm not her shade? And colorism is obviously a huge thing. And you wrote about it in your first book, and now you also grapple with it here. Um, and then there's the fact that your husband is a Jewish white man, and so tell me about that side of things as well.
Yeah. I think, sometimes I carry many identities. I think we all do. I think, even folks are like, oh, I come from a European stock or whatever. And we carry multiple identities. And, sort of to kind of crosswalk what it is to be uh, a white appearing, mixed race, but somebody who was brought up in a black family and gay and in a interfaith, interracial marriage with kids who identify as black. It is complicated. And I don't think that I can write about any aspect or facet of my identity with one brush. And so, what it means for me to be gay and black is very different than what it means to be, just gay, right? Or even just mixed race. And I write about this in the book that, an aspect of my identity. Like, look, for the benefit of our audience, I write about a lot of gay themes and like it's who I am. And so it's on this page. But the book is also about just the aspect of like sort of identity as a man and as a father. And I write about it in this respect that like it's hard for me at times because I don't think my daughters don't see me as truly black. They don't. Does not matter that like I grew up in an all black family, right? And that they don't see because the world doesn't see me that way.
Right.
So they see how the world reacts to me, and then so that becomes the lens by which they see me. And the same is true, honestly, Jerry, about like being gay. They're like,
Right.
you know, I'm sorry, I'm not the fashion gay. I'm not the decorating gay. I'm not the Broadway show gay. I'm sorry. I'm just that was just never me. Or if it was me, it got beat out of me a long time ago. And so they lovingly but jokingly like, you're not really gay, or you're not really black. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry.
How old are they now?
21 and 22.
Right. Um,
And they honestly say it actually would have been easier if you were that gay dad who took us out on shopping excursions and got our
right.
hair done and our nails done. They say that would have been easier for them.
I like that you talk about that. I feel like I'm probably a disappointing gunkle because I'm not, like, doing all the fabulous gay uncle things that I should be doing. My husband and I always say we aspired to be like Auntie May. We weren't rich enough, but also we just don't have enough attention to like actually follow through. But if any of them ever want to come and have some fabulous time in New York, like they're always invited. But we don't have a tiger. We don't, we're not gonna. It's not gonna be quite Auntie Mame level or gay level or anything like that.
Yeah, they're definitely disappointed in that aspect. They're like, "Great, we got gay dads. Like, could we get better versions?" I'm like, "Sorry, no."
um, You also, and this is what's so fascinating about this book, and I really want more people to read it and discover it because, as we said, you start out with childhood and you go through that, but then you really tackle also midlife, and you even get into when you and your husband Todd uh, are really not liking each other anymore, and not liking you. You don't feel like you're gay anymore, and that you're not. You're just like, how did we end up with this life? I mean, I want to get into the fact that you guys chose to be fathers as well, right? Because with your background, many people, like most of my friends and I, have all said we don't ever want children, and yet you decided, yes, we do, and we're going to go through all of this. So, I guess let's start with the first part, which is, um, well, you said you share everything with him. When you wrote about you guys basically getting into that midlife crisis zone, what did? Tell me about that. How he
Yeah,
reacted to that.
I mean, the bar for us, like, I was like, "Is it true? Is it true?" And so that's the first hurdle. Like, if I was writing something that was not uh true, or that was not, even if it's slightly varies from his experience, like, is it in the same vicinity? Like, is it true? And so I've always been, in all of my writing, I've always been honest. And so I think that is the reason why he forgives me. It's like, okay, it's true. Like, now that does not mean that, sometimes people are like, "Oh, I read your book," and he doesn't cringe, and he's like, "Oh God." And I sometimes like, "Oh, you read the book?" I'm like, "Oh, thanks." But I think that's one of the foundations of our relationship, is just sometimes radical honesty with each other. And
Mhm.
so for that reason, I think that he's given me this range of forgiveness. Like, okay, this is, we are honest with each other, and so we can be honest about each other in other respects. But again, it does not take away some of the cringe moments when people quote things back to us or ask us about aspects of the book. Um, but as consistency has helped.
But what about that? About making that big leap, in your 30s, right? When you decided you were gonna be parents,
Yeah.
and you talked about not being, considered Black or gay enough. I mean, many people would also have this, sort of, I mean, it's gotten more popular to think of gay men as being able to be dads, but there's definitely people who think, "Oh, you can't be a good parent because 'cause you're not a mother and you aren't in a traditional nuclear family," and you must have received some of that as well, like, "Well, you're not really dads."
Yeah, I mean, and again, I don't think it was widespread. I mean, I think we tended to kind of end up living in very kind of accepting bubbles, right? And so that always helped. But I do think that, like, I felt, we used to call it our invisible audience. We would walk through airports or walk into restaurants, and like, it was almost like we inserted thought bubbles above everyone, you know?
Mhm.
Like, look at those 2. What are they doing with that? Are they really the fathers? Like, or, especially, I think we often felt judged by moms,
Yeah.
right? Like, oh, and this may not have been the reality, but we certainly imagined it, like, right? Like, you could, and sometimes I know we were like mothers who would just offer us wisdom or advice or help. Like, lady, I got this. Really, we're good. Got it. Been through this. Um, and so I know it came from a place of
But
wanting to
isn't that
help.
something that all parents do and they all hate? Like, everybody likes to give you
I
advice.
guess so. I guess so. I guess so. And so for anyone out there, whoever gave, I know it came from a place of great intention. Just know that you were judged. Rightfully or wrongly, I judged you.
Um, but you decided to do it. Like, tell me again, like, how did you I I I always felt like I had the privilege of not having to be a parent, and you chose this path of of having to do this difficult thing. Tell me why that was so important.
Yeah, I think, you know, uh, Todd and I met when we were, I think, 30. Is that right? No, 33. We met when we were 33. And on our very first, and what was fascinating, we met in an AOL chat room, which, like, for years we hid, like, because, and now, like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm on Grinder, I'm on Tinder, I'm on fill in the blank, and it's not a thing.
No, there was a big stigma, yeah.
Like, it was a very big stigma if you met online. But our very first date, we went out for coffee. And I think we were both of that type of life where at that time of life where it's like, okay, let's get real. Like, what do you want out of life? And so it almost felt like an interview. He was almost interviewing me, and I can't. I think he was the first person to be like, "Would you ever want kids?" And I was like, "Yes." And I don't think I'd ever given any. I'd never sort of wrestled over the idea or thought I did or didn't, or it was not possible or hard it would be, but from the idea of having a family or being a part of a family. So when I think about, like, a very rough upbringing that I had, like, the idea of having a family and being a family was always very important to me. I don't think I ever thought through about, like, oh, that means raising kids. And so that was, we aligned on our values, what we wanted out of life, and having a family was very important to both of us. And so I think before we knew it, we just started on this path, and then it happened. We're like, oh, I guess we're raising kids.
Yeah.
That's the path to having a family. And I think in many ways we sort of backed into that.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so we've covered a lot. I do wanna ask you, though, it's so hard to publish a book like this. Tell us a little bit about your journey into crafting it into what it is and how you got it through the goalposts of actually getting it published.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really important to have these types of books, but it's so hard to find somebody to publish them.
Oh, very much so. I mean, I think it helped that I had written a previous book. So, like, oh, this guy, I guess, can write. And I think for me, and we had this conversation, like, they are standalone essay. And so I've had a lot of experience just personally and professionally doing a lot of essay writing. And so if I can nail an essay, right, like, that's all I focused on. Did I nail the argument? Like, can it stand alone by itself? And
Mhm.
is it strong enough? And so when I got to a point where some of these are things that I had put down on paper years ago. Some of them are like are sort of beginnings of blog posts that I had done. Others were ideas that I sort of wanted to explore. And when I sat down and looked at them in aggregate, I'm like, there's a thread here. I've been writing about this search for identity, this understanding of masculinity, my struggle for different aspects of what it meant to be a man. So I was able to kind of first write the essays, and they may have been in different places and in different spaces. And then when I threaded them together, I'm like, there's a through line here. And that was sort of a hard part in terms of the craft.
Mhm.
Like, how do I pull it all together into cohesive piece? And then in terms of, like, getting it published, I would say I've had quite a good luck with academic presses with strong literary imprints. There are a number of universities out there with literary imprints that are national award winners, that are
Mhm.
national bestsellers, and that route to me felt more accessible, and I'm impatient. I don't wanna wait for, like, one of the big 3 publishers to discover me one day, and so, for me, it was less about, um, the prestige of the imprint or how or the amount of the advance or
Right.
potentially, whether it was in Barnes& and Noble, like, is it accessible? Can anybody who want it find it?
Right.
And so I lucked upon the University of Wisconsin Press,
Yeah.
a really solid literary imprint, and that's what you see here today.
Yeah, they have a very long history of publishing great, queer literature, both nonfiction and fiction.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Um, so how do I craft this question? I you know, there's a way of writing this writing your story where, um, there's a trauma plot, right? And in a way, you're interrupting that trauma cycle, which is something that people maybe at one point used to say that phrase. I don't know if they still do. And I'm curious about your gay or queer identity and if you feel like it gave you the key to be able to change that. Because one of the things I see is being an outsider, you're like a triple outsider, right? Like you're just an observer trying to figure out the world, and being a smart young human, you observed and you figured out a way to fix it. Or did you? Like what do you feel like your gayness actually helped you get out of that cycle?
This is fascinating. This is a conversation that like goes back for me decades. There was sort of a friend slash mentor of mine who used to talk about the exceptionalism of being gay,
Yeah,
right? Like, what is it about being gay that makes you exceptional? And part of it is like, this as gay men, like we tended to overachieve to
yeah.
kind of sort of mask other aspects of our identity. So we overworked, overachieved, like in our careers, right?
And we needed to be the good boy.
The good boy.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So that was an aspect of it. And you do, I think the other thing that we bring as queer people, and more specifically in this context as gay men, is that outside observer, right? The ability to go outside of ourselves, to observe ourselves, observe our environment, observe how people interact with us. Part of it is literally it's out of safety. You have to be able to read the room. You have to understand the context in order to walk safely through the world. That's true of folks who are Black, right? As
yeah,
well. Like you have to be willing, you have to be able to code switch.
yeah,
You have to be able to show up in a boardroom and mask what might be seen as effeminate mannerisms in order to kind of operate in that realm. Now, I don't think that's right, but it was what was required for many, many years. And I think that there is also just a, a temperament, a sensitivity that comes with how we are socialized as well to be able to operate in different environments, get along with many different people, um, and also to I think there's just sort of like there's also an aesthetic sensibility, right? Like to be able to evaluate and judge,
hmm,
sometimes in not a negative connotation, like what is this thing? How do I interpret it? We see the world with very finely attuned eyes.
yeah.
And I think that is kind of what and I think a lot of us bring to um, whatever our creative endeavors are.
Absolutely. I think you're so right. And I definitely have thought of the gay exceptionalism thing. So it's good to hear it said that way. And I also learned that that wasn't the case. Like before I met any other gay people, I thought it was definitely true as well. And then well, you kind of go into that when you are hanging out with the gym crew or the WeHo guys who are criticizing everyone. That's a good
Yeah,
scene.
there's a flip side to that, right? Like, that we yeah, you can't and then there's an aspect of it that people want to set themselves above and apart from others, and that is the toxic aspect of it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing that's great about your book is that you've lived so many different places and so many different lives. So you've seen it from so many perspectives, what I appreciate, because sometimes you do feel like there's a sort of provincialism, especially if it's like a New York story or something where it's just that. And you're showing us all over the country and different classes and different everything. Um, so we kind of touched on this a little bit when we were talking about heated rivalry, but I want to go a little deeper because to kind of wrap things up, I am always the reason why I started the Queer Love Project, to be perfectly honest, is because I'd been gay all my life and I'd been writing about it, I've been researching it. And then, I was there on the front lines when the It Gets Better campaign happened. I actually had the gay brother of the young man who jumped off the bridge as my intern and helped him, kind of deal with that trauma, writing through it. And Tyler Clementi's brother. And and so there was always this feeling like and then I was there when marriage happened and everyone's like, okay, you guys won. It's over. You guys are, everything's fine. And yet I still see young people struggling. I still see people not understanding how to find love or how to talk about it or how to, all the things that you're writing about. What do we do? I mean, you're a dad. Tell us. Tell us, dad.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, again, and I'm going to apologize for those folks who are here who don't identify as gay and may identify somewhere else on the queer spectrum. So I'm, I say that because that is the lens by which I'm going to answer this question. And that is, I think the other thing that I discovered in writing this book is that young men, boys, we take our cues from so many different places, even outside of our own nuclear family, about what it is to be a boy, a man, to be gay, to find love. Our boys are watching. And I share an anecdote in here. It's a funny anecdote about a gym teacher. When I was little, and an sort of an embarrassing anecdote about me not knowing what a fly was. And I still hold on to that memory today. And I think about our boys are watching. They don't have to be, part of our family. Every interaction that we have with young men, they're taking clues and cues from us about what it means to be a good man, a good human being, a good partner, a good spouse. And so that's what I think that is what we do about it. We need to be more mindful that we are modeling for young men right now in many different ways. Yes, they're getting it from pop culture. Yes, they're getting it from their own families. Yes, they're getting it from friends, but they are getting those cues from so many different places. And so our actions, our words matter.
I
That's
mean,
what we do about it.
how I know this is a big question, but how do you deal with that as a dad and a parent? Like, obviously, your children are now adults, but you're still there worried about them. And there's so much toxic stuff in the media and on social media, on everything coming in all different places. Is it just like, don't pay attention? Or is it trying to be louder than those other voices?
Yeah, I think it is trying to be louder. And I think the small, and louder is relative. I think the small moments count. I think about, a young man that my daughter was dating and me being, I'm like, hey, dude, that's not, no, you don't. And it had nothing to do with how he was treating my daughter, but it was like, no, as men, we don't do this, right? We do this. And that was a very small moment. And, but I hope that's something that he carries with him in what other relationships that he has out in the world. And even in the workplace, again, I speak from my own experience. Like I've had a lot of male mentors, good and bad, who thought all they were teaching me about was like, here's how you are a good worker or a good employee. In many ways, they were giving me lessons on being a man, and they had no idea what I was taking away from their interactions or watching how they operated with other people. Small moments and big moments.
Right.
And so it matters, especially in the world that we live in today, how we show up in the world, not even in terms of our identities, sort of our identities and our orientations, but as human beings.
Hmm.
And I think that's kind of the sort of micro lesson that I got out of the book and sort of the macro message I would give to folks who are watching us today.
Well, Steve, this has been great. And as I told you, I could probably talk to you forever. And hopefully we'll talk again because you have a lot to share. And I just want to make sure people know that they can find both your books, High Yella and Man-Made. There you go, Man-Made. And that they're available in ebooks as well. And High Yella is actually an audiobook, but Man-Made needs to be an audiobook as well. But I think you should read it because it would be great. And anybody who's also listening to this or coming to this and is already not a subscriber to the Queer Love Project, I just want everyone to know that it's a platform that we have on Substack. It's free to be a subscriber. We publish personal essays every week, interviews, questionnaires, other things like this. So thanks so much, Steve, for joining me. And this has been a pleasure.
Same here. Appreciate it. Thanks so much, Jerry.
All right. Talk to you later.